Well, hello all, and welcome to Get Practical, Be Magical. A little something I want to do for this Saturday night as I was sitting around looking for something at least semi-productive. So this will at least qualifies for the semi-productive part of things. And so let me get a little settled in here. Hope I didn't overdress for the occasion. Sure I didn't over shampoo. So let's see what's happening here on live. Hello Lee and hello Speculum. Actually, I went to type something into the board here, into the chat, but every once in a while my cursor like it blinks, but it doesn't see my keyboard. I have to refresh to make it work. So I just decided to come on camera and say hello to Niche and Lee, except when I speak I can't put the heart icon there. So please see a heart icon somewhere in my words as I say hello. So I kind of enjoy the little thumbnail here. This is obviously kind of a representation of our mother dreaming the world that she has us on, and I really enjoyed it, and just the theme of being magical is now practical. If we're who we really, I mean, it's really practical to be what we genuinely are, how we were created, how we showed up in this milieu on a planet that happens to be being dreamt unlike other planets. And fortunately, John Lash has been putting out some radio Gaianim. I guess Ginny has a specific way she likes to say it, but for now, Gaianim. And it's really been great for somebody like myself who has been doing planetary tantra for years, with John being the teacher, and a lot of his teaching has to do with his celestics, or the ability to read the night sky as we used to do it. In a non-astrological, it's kind of like an earth astrology, astronomy based. It's decidedly different because it's working with what's out there, and allowing that our vantage point provides kind of gives us a picture. There's what's going on, and especially what is going on with the Earth, and what she is planning to do gets revealed in these signs and in the sky. So a lot of what staying current with John is about the fact that he's always getting fresh intel, that he's sharing sharing observations. And during the GNE, it was very much about the observations and, what going through the different phases and tracking it. And also, I really like the fact, because he's speaking with other people that he does his shamanic work with. And as those of us who are doing shamanic, and magical practice, and then gathering with others who are doing the same thing so that we can unpack together. And John made a very strong and, in my opinion, beautiful point when he was talking about, when people ask about Thelete, that would be the counterpart to Sophia in the Syzygy when they were produced in the Pleroma. So he gives his intel, but he says very clearly, when you go and do your own investigation of this who is Thelete, what's Thelete's place, you will come up most likely with, supplementary information. And that's how it's meant to be. And then the good thing is when we can come together unpack the pieces, and then sometimes realize that sometimes in the unpacking, it could, that we could pull down one side before the other. We could misinterpret a zig for a zag. But when we come together, that process cleans up. And that's actually what made the Gnostic material, or the mysteries of antiquity, so powerful, was that sharing of the unpacking of the experiences. Because although each experience is unique, there's a commonality, there's a common map. It's like going to the same concert and two people reporting, and they'll report two different things, even though they were at the same concert at the same physical location. So it was, it was really very empowering. It's like, hey, I'm doing my work and you do your work, and then we come together and we share our work together. So to share our work together, if we get a little limited about, how we're going to unpack things if only some of us are doing the work. The more that do the work, the more that can be useful in an unpacking session. An unpacking session is not about opinions. It's not about what ifs. It's about what happened to you. And then sharing that with other people. It's very experiential. It's not experimental per se. Because our experience is built on an experiment. But again, there's a lot of our very left brain proclivities have made us big what-ifers. We could be given some of the richest information and we like it, but a voice in our head goes, but what if? And they give us this what if, and then you think it's your what if, and now you want to be satisfied because you have a question, and it really doesn't matter whether the question is really good. It's just the fact that you had a question. And there are certain influences on humanity that will keep us questioning forever. So, for us to work together and be practical in some achievements, we need to be magical. We can, just like a lot of other things sometimes that we don't go into, and we'll, be an observer and listen to the fruits of things, and then we'll participate in other things. Hello, Darcy. And I have to admit, I'm noticing that it's a little slower turnout, and I did think about holding it up to 11 p.m. because, that's kind of like when TV ends a lot of times, at least those hour shows or 2-hour movies. But I didn't have the energy to wait. When I conceived this at about 20 after 9, I went, 10 o'clock feels right. And if that means that only a few of us are here, that works for me. So this is really a byline of that I feel is important for us, and I'm going to be saying it a lot. Be practical, get practical, be magical. And a lot of the conversations about where we're going and what we're going to do make sense if we talk about what we're capable of really doing and achieving together. Understanding our true birthright is crucial, actually, because if you think you're something that you're not, you can get lost. Okay. So being magical isn't special. It's what we are. It was how we were created. We're the magical child. And the luminous child. And we have an adversary that is non-corporeal, except when it affects a few billion people. Then it becomes a little tricky. And it is a lot, actually, it's a lot tricky, and it is the current state of affairs on the planet. And it's, it's really kind of interesting when we look at, one of the main influences the desert religions brought to the ancient world, that the ancient world didn't have such issues with, except for, in isolated places. But those two things would be magic and sex. And the two things that were really basically prohibited, at least in any kind of natural form of expression that we had done for hundreds of thousands of years, was squashed and made illegal in their system. And that's part of their signature. By their fruits you will know them. And what's nice is I'm getting more into music, and music is a powerful form of magic. It's one of the reasons why when you watch TV, you almost never watch anything that doesn't have some kind of music leading you to a certain state of mind. I mean, you might watch some classic old movie, but that has large periods of of just the mood of no music, because they're not leading you, they're actually telling you a story. Let me mute myself for a second while I clear up. Gotta get to my audio. There I am. When we consider how much music is used in commercials, in movies, a big part of poor storytelling in modern movies is the music supplements. Let's say it's not a particularly even well-written scene, not a particularly well-acted scene, but the music really lets you know that you're supposed to feel tense about this, that there's lots of energy moving. I mean, they can kind of take you into all kinds of places musically where the script would like to take you there, but poor script writing and poor acting necessitate assistance. And of course, even where it doesn't necessitate it, to really heap it on, to really just immerse you in the narrative they wish you to go away with. So the music helps you to kind of get lost and not really have your critical and discerning capacities on. You're in receiving, you're in this, music, kind of right brains you a little bit. Hello, Robin. Well, in many ways, I mean, I'm getting back into music more publicly, but to do it publicly also, it requires me to put in more private time, because I'm a professional, and so there's a certain amount of preparation for certain things. The only thing I didn't prepare for, and fortunately I got away with it, was in my last Weber speaker one that went up, I don't know, about an hour ago. I play a few bars of a song, "Are You Listening?" that I wrote many years ago, and I just played that through my 8-inch Weber speaker and my guitar before I came on screen. And when I said I got away with it, I'm listening to it, I go, man, you thought you're so used to playing that, and you haven't played it in a while. You figured, oh, I'll just start the camera and play something I've always played, and then then you realize that it is practicing those things. And when you're playing them regularly, oh yeah, you can close your eye, put it behind your head, you can play it. But that muscle memory needs to stay fresh. Oh, that's right. You're already Mari. Hello, Mari. You're where you are. You're already in the next day. So it is that, to me. Talk about now. No, everybody. The goddess does have a sense of humor. Always. I mean, even despite the earth is a mess and there's almost no very little clean water to drink, she made that water for us. That's our drinking water that we don't care what corporations do to. that is spoiled. That's not her drinking water. That was made for us. Anyway, so I just think, anyway, to me, the sense of humor is, okay, was it during this week? Where did we hear from, supposedly from somebody who spoke to the Pope? Pope says there's no hell. I like that, because one of the reasons it's hard to pull people away from Jehovah is because they're afraid they're going to go to hell if they desert the bastard. And he kind of is a bastard in every sense of the word. But I should have called him Yaldi, because those in the know who Yaldi and his many names are. And for some people, Jehovah is still kind of, hey, man, you're talking about my dude. But I'm not concerned too much with that, with the crowd that normally shows up here. Although you could go to Leak Project when he had one of I forget, but it was addressing some, what if there had never been a Bible, I think was the title. And he really gets hounded by Christians. And it's, I don't know, I guess, again, he's young, and he has that really young appeal. And he's got lots of energy. He really has good energy. And of course, being in Grandma's garage, come on, everybody loves a grandma. So, and also, so tonight I'll do a little more practice. I am following the chat somewhat. But I'm kind of realizing, and this is a good chat. So when they work together. If the chat kind of goes off on its own, I'll just stay kind of focused, because the chat sometimes gets usually towards the end. Sometimes it can get as high as 20 viewers. And then my videos will go up, and they'll be at least usually north of 100. So that would mean that let's just pick the number 100, and let's say the full number of 20 people watched the live stream where I was kind of interacting with them. Well, there's 80 people who are not in on that. So I have to kind of presence that when I do these live streams, although I am definitely interacting with the audience, just to remember that there are people who are going to be watching this, and they're going to be listening to me. And so I better say something that would apply to somebody who's not involved in the chat. Yeah, I know a lot of people feel that all the texts have something helpful. If you know what you're looking for, they're not particularly helpful. And if you don't know what they're looking for, they're also not particularly helpful. I mean, to me, they work as confirmation of the many mythos across the world of certain things like giants. I mean, there's a commonality in the hello, Kalindal, in the various mythos, but we're led to believe, especially by Western esoterists, that there's something that we're missing in that we have to comb through that to get the important thing. And to me, the most important thing you can learn is a Sophianic narrative. Once you have the Sophianic narrative, you have a map and you know what you want to find. It's pretty difficult reading all those texts when you looking for a clue. To me, the reason to read those texts is having a clue and investigating it. Looking at the text for clues without a clue, I hope that it kind of says what kind of circular enterprise that is. Endeavor might be a better word. So, again, to me, the helpfulness of all text is you might find commonalities. But if you know what's wholesome, then you can see the good commonalities. But if you don't know what's wholesome, you don't know. If you don't know what's wholesome, you don't know what's unwholesome. And again, I go to a lot of live chats. I speak with a lot of people, and the Sophianic narratives, it will settle you in. I mean, Moose comes from another Earth tradition, But because we're both mother based, the traditions and other things how we might interact with the earth could be subtly different, but we're coming from the same narrative. And so, it's it used to be the narrative, now it's an emerging narrative, and it's in competition with the extant narrative, which really is the demiurgic one. So, and again, we get back to we're not looking so much for knowledge as we're looking for wisdom, and knowledge is part and parcel of that wisdom. But if you have if you're sitting within wisdom herself and allowing that to guide you as you go about what's almost like your birthright to explore and to learn what it's like to have the kind of consciousness we have in a biological framework. Why don't you answer the question, who is not demiurgic? If you're saying there's nobody that's not demiurgic, that's an absolute statement, and most absolute statements are weak. Okay, well, there are lots of people who are not demiurgic. To be demiurgic really is to be following a kind of cosmology. And there are and the interesting thing, we're in this really strange interim period where a lot of people really have pretty sincerely divorced Ialdi. And now they're dating. And they're dating a lot of weird characters. People you really wouldn't want to start families with. And so to ask who is not demiurgic is to kind of say that, there's nothing, everything is demiurgic, and that's quite defeatist. And I don't even, and not only is it defeatist, I don't see that. That's not my experience. I'm not demiurgic. Demiurgic is about mimicry, claiming things that aren't yours, deception, mocking, inversion. That's what's demiurgic. And so the world isn't all that. And if we can get our shit straight, then we won't be that. And the fixing the world starts right there. So, so it's I really wonder, are there people who have developed at least some ways of knowing, like, even if you didn't plan to be in a trance, when you fell into a trance, and when you got some packages, downloads, call them what you will, the complex nature that they often come to us in, and the absolute need for unpacking, starting with some kind of minor unpacking on our own, of our own, and then unpacking it with others. So, it's only 7 people here, but I'm going to ask, just generally, how many people are really working with this other state of consciousness that is part of who we are, so that we can engage with the rest of the natural world, which happens to be called supernatural, because it exists a little bit frequency above the natural world, but it's all a continuum. So somebody in the chat says establishing trust and building a foundation for good dialogue takes time, in their opinion. It does take time, but it doesn't. The clock doesn't start until people begin and figuring that out. You either establish the trust and then get burned, or you don't make much headway. And if people would get magical, they could read each other, and they would understand when you tie in with the earth, your ability to hear people speak changes, because now you have her consciousness with you. So it's so much harder for people to deceive you, because what gets said is so bizarre. It's so unattached to where you are anchored. So I mean, establishing trust and building good foundation for good dialogue takes time. So in other words, the time is not now. Or we're in the middle of that, but we're not quite ready to go there. And what I'm also trying to say is, this is a practical thing that's being said, but we wouldn't be as challenged if we were more magical, because we could read each other better. We could ascertain what's a waste of time and what's not a waste of time, which comes down to that issue of trust. I hear, at a time when where things are really compressing, where it's really kind of issue, it's, the lancing of the boil is coming. And then, so when you have all this impending, and we're having discussions about taking the time to establish trust and good foundation, I see that, I never see that as again, just get to things. If you don't trust people, tell them you don't trust them. Instead of saying, well, it's going to take me more time to figure this out. You either get a good feeling for people or you don't. Let me mute my self just for a second here. Yeah, being brothers and sisters, it is very interesting, and it's a great term, because we're at this really strange time where some of us seem to be perceiving one reality in the world, and then we have friends, family, loved ones who spend time in front of the TV, and they seem to come away from that TV with a different view than some of us. And now, I've heard some of the woke as fuck ways of explaining things, and I can see somebody who watches TV and meets a woke as fuck person saying, "Go away, you're nuts." You have Tourette's and no data. You're not deep. You have lots of memes. Go away. But if you're, there are some of us actually really care about these people and know how to introduce things kind of quietly, picking something that probably might be the least incredible, and also picking that topic that not only is the least incredible, but we also have the most kind of sensible information, places like third parties. You can say, well, you can go read about it here. You can go read about it there. You can research it here. And so in those instances where people who actually can make a case about what their conspiracy investigations have produced, when they're speaking to loved ones, and if they're making a good one and the loved ones tuned them out, I want to know what's wrong. because it's just we're all like brothers and sisters and cousins, and if you can go to your own family of TV watchers with a cogent story about what's going on, and they choose not to believe you, think how weird it is. You know they love you. You know that. Okay? So here's this deep love bond. These people would, good chance they would take a bullet for you. But when it comes to a narrative about what's happening in their world, love doesn't matter. Because they don't love the people on the TV. They wouldn't take a bullet for them. But they'll drink a bucket of bullshit from them. And that's strange. So when you see strange behaviors like this, you know something's wrong. You know that there's an insertion in the psychology that has kind of even overridden the impulses of familial love, where people who would take a bullet for us won't listen to us over strangers on a TV. That's a sign of an infection. So these are trying times. Once again, love is not enough, and I think part of that is because maybe we don't know what real love is. Real love is actually wisdom. Agape and wisdom are synonymous, and let us never forget that the name that was given by the Greeks to the intelligence in the planet, Sophia, means wisdom. It's and I never forget it. Well, more often than not, even if the word Sophia goes through my head, the word is wisdom. And so, and then to me, there's a couple of words that I consider synonymous. So agape, real love, the genuine stuff. Again, people go, well, what about, again, to me, Eros shows its weakness in divorce courts. And then sometimes the insane nastiness that results from that, okay? Eros brought the marriage together. Then we have Philos. Philos shows its weakness when people who've been friends for a long time have a disagreement and suddenly they become worst enemies. That shows the weakness of Philos. Agape is the understanding, the gnosis, the experience of what that love is, how it is a glue of everything, and that how in its practice it is wisdom and it is compassion. So agape, wisdom, and compassion, to me, are just different shadings of the same quality. And then there's, since I see the world, the word world, I just, to me, it's one of the things that we really want to keep clear. And it also helps us sometimes when we read ancient texts that might have genuine Gnostic text in them, and a lot of ancient texts do. Interwoven, but so this is, it's a case of knowing the threads that the tapestry is made of. And Gaia is a planet, whatever shape it might, it's a realm, okay? That's Gaia, Sophia, the earth. Then there's the world. The earth is not the world. The earth is where we live. The world is this thing, and thing is a big emphasis here. The world is the thing built on the earth. It is the systems that are not part of the ecosystem on the earth. All of the systems that are not part of nature's systems are part of the world. And the world is not the Earth. So sometimes when you know, so in many ways, you could, if somebody were to say, what do you think about the world? What do you think about the world ending tomorrow? I'd say, I think it's a fucking great idea. Let's make it happen. And because the end of the world would not be the end of the planet. Actually, it would be the end of misery, the end of the world. I mean, there might be some adjustment miseries, but the whole thing is that everybody who's doing anything in this world is a common human being. I mean, what's making the world run is people. Of course, they're showing up for the fiat system, because the world was contrived where land that you used to be able to live on now belonged to a king, and you had to pay that king or that whatever rent. Mama does not charge rent. So again, there are certain, once you understand there is no rent to be on this planet, and if you're paying rent and you're going, wait, planet doesn't charge rent. Oh, the world charges rent. Yeah. So the world's ending tomorrow. Whew. Can we please see that happen? So it's a really good distinction. We should realize the world sucks. The planet is a dream world. I am back, right? I mean, I see that I go offline for a minute, but I see myself constantly coming back. And there's a lot of language that we use that keeps that world up. And that'll be, that'll be a process, but it's a process to start. I think it's a process we can start right now. I'm not sure we need the time to get to know each other. Yeah, I will buffer from time to time. I mean, almost the whole stream I see bad video settings. It's the best I can get with what I have as an upload here, without it being completely blurred out. I'm kind of like at that point where there's still some clarity in the video. And also I, kept the audio fairly well. I think I dropped it from 48 to 44. So, more and more in between, we're not, when the Can't You Hear Me Gnostic live stream, which I'm very glad that I'm glad I gotten inspired just to bring it back. I mean, I have to admit, the fact I just want everybody to know, when I go offline, I see it here on my side as well, because I am actually looking at your feed. So when your feed goes down, I see it. And then also the fact that there has been some dialogue between John Lash and some of his people and myself makes me realize that it's a good time to keep a Gnostic live stream up and running. And also I had to get a few things figured out, and I got them figured out really well. Got them really well settled, balanced, makes sense. Saw some of my own frustrations, dealt with them, and made them, and because very often frustration is really a perspective or wanting something that isn't happening, and you make little adjustments and everything fixes itself. We can adjust a lot of the world by adjusting our attitudes. So I'm looking forward. I have to start experimenting with, and also I'm not even sure what room. This is the best room because I have my internet connection, but there's a chance to making some of the better videos where I kind of use mics on top of the speakers and do a little bit more professional recording. might be better done in another room, and I wouldn't be live streaming it, so it doesn't really matter whether I have an internet connection while I'm recording it. I mean, have, you know, a lot of fun ideas just to talking about making music, the equipment of making music. I have to admit, you know, exploring the intelligence and of electricity, studying electricity, even in amp circuits, and I'm staying pretty focused in a very narrow stream of electronics because I want to apply it to something I have. You know, I want to be able to build my own guitar and bass amps, and I have some fairly. And now I know how to read schematics and how to mix and match. I can say, well, I wouldn't have that, but I would have that. I think I'd like, and even some things that I haven't quite seen, but I've kind of conceived. So there's lots of things I'd like to make happen, and they're all about, you know, this world of good tone, making music, making the soundtrack for a new paradigm. And being more mindful of, you know, the music we make and the music we consume. And the other thing is, most people who do this kind of gear stuff, invariably, like, oh, they're trying out a pedal, you get like a couple of seconds of clean, and then of course it's, you know, 18 samples of overdriven tone. So somebody has to do something that isn't all about the overdriven tone. And so, you know, I see like kind of like a little niche. Weber speakers, I think, are one of the finest speakers, and I enjoy. But also they make great amp kits. Matter of fact, one or two of the amp kits I plan on building will probably be bought from Weber. One of them is from Mojo Tone. He has a unique thing, but even I don't even. He uses a specific kind of tremolo, and there's a tremolo circuit I like. But it's a Class A amp, and I want a 2-tube Class B amp. I happen to like that. I like that sound better. But that adds another level of complexity to the amp that he designed, because it needs another tube to invert a signal that you would need to put in the other tube so that the two tubes match. So I'm really intellectually excited about it, and I want to turn that into some kinetic energy. I have a few friends of mine I might be able to turn to for some of the, you know, help I'll need to source parts, because when you're barely making your rent, buying stuff to build, kind of, it just falls out of the possibilities of that time. So, but I'm excited about a lot of things. But there are certain things I can do that I don't need to spend a dime on, which is, you know, make some videos, use some of the speakers I have, make some comparisons, and even strategies for tones. Yeah, I have a lot percolating, and I'm pretty excited about it. And we need, you know, again, and then of course, making my actual musical videos. And once, so I can actually accomplish two things at one time. Notice I say that rather than kill two birds with one stone. Accomplish two things at the same time, and by learning how to record the speakers to make a good, you know, review video of speakers, I also learn how to do some of the little bit of live performance I want to do to my background performance to create which are my performance videos, which are to take songs of mine and perform them live, at least singing the lead part live, playing bass or guitar live, and then having other things behind me. Kind of like an exalted karaoke type of thing. But I think it's something that a lot of people could do. A lot of people have the equipment. And so then the whole thing is like, well, how, you know, it's almost like starting a concept. And for me, in many ways, it's a form of karaoke. But you're karaokeing your own music, and you're providing the, you know, like when you sing karaoke, all that music's there backing you up. In this case, rather, that you could just provide your voice, but in my case, I'll provide a voice and an instrument, and then have drums and whatever instruments I'm not playing in support behind me. And that's an interesting way for me to introduce my songs. And what's beautiful is when I decided I wasn't going to do Can't You Hear Me Gnostic for that 1 week, and I'm realizing, okay, so I'm not getting Mother's message out, or at least the message, or at least a discussion presencing her. How would I do that? And I said, well, I would now, that would become a driving force in the words in my song, would be to take the things that were passionate enough within me that I wanted to do a live stream about it, and start, like, in other words, if you can't talk about it, sing about it. Or if nobody's interested in you talking about it, sing about it. And so even though now I've changed my mind and I will continue to talk about it, the idea that to sing about it hasn't changed. So it was almost like this 1 week gave me that perspective, told me that I need to have I was like almost given a theme for my music. And then when I decided to do this, it was like, oh, okay, so keep the theme and do this. In other words, more streams of motherness. So rather than put my cigarette in my little silly cigarette holder, which is made of piping, I finally put some tape on the end. I really got tired of the taste of brass on my mouth. Not to mention there's threads there. They weren't sharp. Well, I did unsharpen them, but make it a little more palatable. People might say, oh, you should have left it, should have left it to brass. That copper will kill the bacteria. I'm not worried about my bacteria. And it's, and part of the fun is, it's, because it isn't just about doing the song, it's because there's a camera, there's a visual aspect. I've always taken advantage of the visual aspect of the performing arts. And so, to me, being on a stage, I've been on stages that were not, basically were space on the floor. But most of them, I've been on stages that were at least 12 inches higher than the floor. And so I have a sense of it's showtime. And especially recording like a music video, it'll really be showtime. So I kind of look forward to having some fun with that on any number of levels, including how outrageous should I be? Because when I decide to just allow myself to do my happy dance, I don't have to plan outrage. Actually, the whole thing is, when I say how outrageous will it be, it's almost like, how raw are we going to do it? Not like, it's not like I have a plan of outrageousness and then it would say, okay, keep this in, don't do this. No, it's just a matter of how happy I want to dance. Because at a certain point, a happy dance might even interrupt the performance. So there are certain natural control factors going on there. So it'll be interesting. I mean, it's been we've been under 10 for the most part, and it'll be interesting to see, because I'll be on when it hits 11 o'clock in 6 minutes, and it'll be interesting if there is suddenly a few more people showing up, because TV, the TV programming ended somewhere. I guess Robin is saying I should have some mascara. Once again, the only time anybody would ever see makeup on my face is if Moose applied it. So we're gonna, we have some logistical problems there. it's really funny, Lee, that you bring up the ambassador because ambassador's a friend of mine. Had a text exchange with him earlier today. Matter of fact, we're supposed to speak tomorrow. We were supposed to speak yesterday, but we keep on missing each other. I keep that quiet because that a go is absolutely brilliant, but until it's a go, it's an open for ridicule. I've been knocking around in forums for some years now. I know the mean spirit of people, and so I've done. I was really glad when he got too busy to do things, and now he's kind of wanting to speak to people again. And I have some trepidation for him, just because he's a good man, got a good heart, and he's trying to do almost the impossible. And so, anybody, again, I understand where people could get skeptical, and with that skepticism be biting in their comments. So, I understand everything. So for me, the way that was best dealt with is not to talk about it. I spend many hours each week with the Global Mission of Peace and interacting with the ambassador. It's a part of my life. I consider it, for me and for us, I like keeping it fairly private, not secret, just private. And then, as we're incubating the goods, when there's some goods, then we kind of come out. Because, again, lots of things were said a few years. They're all, there's records of it on my own channel. And so for me, there comes a time where if there's going to be a wait, how about we get quiet? So just we're here. We're not waiting in the open. We can be a very impatient species, largely because we're no longer magical. Once you get magical, you find out how much more patient you get, because you start living on real time, not this clock Chronos time. And right now, transition works fine. If we didn't do both times, we would get lost real quick. But it's time for us to live in two worlds: the world of natural time, the world of clock time, the world of 3D practicality, and the world of supernatural and magic. And I'm also pleased that, even though I did catch some, certainly caught some heat for supporting Global Mission of Peace and the ambassador, and it's funny how almost so many things that have been lined up and kind of waiting for years just seem to be suddenly, it's like whatever was holding everything back I wouldn't say it's come completely untied, but it's like almost like one of those Hollywood scenes where you see like a rope untying and little by little. So, but anyway, if it's part of everything else that's coming loose now and is looking that things will get better, it'll be great to just come back and say, okay, I said it then, and I'm not going to say I told you so, because that's bullshit. Didn't know. But every time I checked in with parts of myself that should know whether should I stay or should I go now, I was always instructed to stay. Did I write something down? Let me see if I wrote something. Let me see if I wrote a little note to myself here. I think I did. Reminded me of a thought stream I wanted to pursue. You know, a big part of goob watching. By the way, goob or goobs are what I call the elite, the Illuminati, the global controllers. I'm not they're not goobers. Goobers has a definition. They're goobs. So when you hear me say goobs, those are the people you might call the Illuminati or the elite. And so a big part of alternative YouTubeage is tracking the goobs. What are the goobs doing now? What magic or technology are they unleashing on us now? Now, in the tech field, you know, we have our own nerds and geeks, a little underfunded. So again, might be a latency. But when it comes to the magical part of their fuckery, they should be getting laid out, man. And this is why being magical is practical. Because there are organized people working all kinds of magic in this world against this planet. It is time for those who are not the goobs, and there aren't many goobs, or one of the few billions of people who are under their sway, to start kicking back magically. And one of the first kickbacks is also just to be able to look at their logos. They're supposedly, and it's like, oh please. Like, you know, the monster one with the 3 claw tears. Oh, you're terrifying me. Stop it, goobies. Please stop terrifying me with your horrible logos. The logos have no real intrinsic magic other than, like, in other words, you're buying products that they have bad intentions on, and they get filled by the fact that, you know, first of all, you're not magically literate enough to see these things. And then if somebody does explain it to me, you think there's some kind of magic that can hurt you. Excuse me, I meant to get into the we. I think, you know, sometimes I'm listening to other people who are trying to get a message across, and they get into that you stuff, which I used to fall into, and I don't know why it happened. So a big part of the mystique of the goobs is their whole magical thing that everybody's always trying to decode. And it's, you know, it's again, why we want to decode? Oh, because it's going to tell us what they're going to do to us next. And I just really feel our time is much better spent, first of all, doing our own magic, and then making them have to spend some time figuring out what we're going to do next. Hello, Vern. G'day. Kiwis in the house. Sorry. Didn't mean to get all ghetto on you. That was actually I had a Greek Jewish friend of mine when I was young, and we were in the Bronx, and we just still lived in a pretty pale part of the Bronx. Not that pale mattered, but it was still fairly pale, and where it wasn't pale, those were our friends. And he was the first person to give me the concept of ghetto that wasn't about bad neighborhoods or people from a certain background, country, racial thing. And I guess, you know, historically there were Jewish ghettos. So he was able to give me a concept of a ghetto, of it being, he said, what a ghetto really is a mindset. He was the first one who told me that the only way you get out of the ghetto is thinking outside of ghetto limitations. The limitations as a species that we have on ourselves. In many ways, the monotheist religions have ghettoized us. They've ghettoized us as a species, and then by breaking into other branches, they ghettoized the ghettoizing. They made ghettos in the ghetto. This is a pretty, this came to me, I wasn't 21 yet, because he told me this before I went to California, and I remembered I wasn't 21 when I went to California, because I wasn't illegally allowed to drink there. So his explanation of the ghetto as actually a psychological state was huge. And it actually enabled me to get out of the ghetto, enable him to get out of the ghetto. I have friends from the Bronx who are still, they have great jobs. They're still ghettoized. Is anybody ghettoing this? So, a big part of the narratives that come from institutional narrative making is to keep the ghettos going. Keep the big ghetto going, and keep the various subdivided ghettos subdivided. And part of this whole thing about get practical, get magical is about us breaking out and okay, I'm going to stop. About us breaking out. End of sentence. Now, as anybody who's following me and is even knows the name John Lash, maybe knows the sound of his voice. If you know the sound of his voice, chances are you've been exposed to anything I'm going to cover here. Since I'm going to cover some of what might be considered controversial, the controversial is the thing that I can be assured most people will have heard of. And that has to do with the Kalika War Party, which I call the T cells of the Anthropos. And the fact of just how easy it was to roll over the ancient world, because they had some arms laying around for local skirmishes and stuff like that, but they didn't do organized warfare. Organized warfare is always from a city-state. City-states are relatively new developments, at least since the deluge. But the part of the reason why there's so little desire for a lot of these ancient sites that like Sylvia Ivanova is showing in her New Earth series is because these ancient cultures, generally when you break down and look at what the buildings are there and what the structure was, it doesn't look like a very centralized structure. In other words, it'd probably be pretty hard to identify a seat of government, of guberment. And so they really don't want to uncover a world free of kings, queens, and other assholes thinking that they have the right to tell people what to do, and that they have the land that you lived on is now theirs. Divine right. Okay, later, Vernon. Trying to find my place again. So organized. So one of the things that kind of came, organized warfare became pretty normal once the Anunnaki, started. But actually, it really became more like that when the humans, when kingship was lowered from heaven, as they put it, which is divine right. Again, this is their words telling their narrative to people. It's a narrative they're selling. What are the conditions of the sale? You buy or I cut your head off. So there was that whole. So that basically it was the whole. I mean, even when we look at the conquest of Canaan, Israel is giving themselves some Lebensraum. I hope you all know the word Lebensraum, and if you don't, then no, we can't do much about it. And I think a big part of the creation of that safe space was because you have a newly inoculated people, inoculated for some period of time, according to the mythos, spending 40 years in the desert, letting the ones who remembered the old ways die, and the ones who only know the new ways are the ones who march into the promised land. And of course, maybe a little military training out there in the desert. And then you get to the new place, and the only way you're going to really keep your own people in check is to have a relatively safe perimeter of people without foreign concepts and strange gods. So it had to be sterilized, and so that's kind of what happened there. But once it was sterilized, there really wasn't much trouble later on. They had their space. They were going to stay there. They weren't going to intermarry. No problems. Unfortunately, that cesspool leaked, and the sepsis is now what we call the world. But we on reflection, we see that one of the main reasons why this uprising was so successful was because they were willing to embrace organized warfare. And they didn't really have to worry so much about their crops because they were going to use instead of building plows, they built swords. So they didn't even have to. All they had to do was kill the people at harvest time in the next place, and and then they could even steal their plows if they intended to do any agriculture. So we really, the world that we have the belief system was, spread by the sword once Christianity got a hold of it. And if you look at, in most cases of, where the Muslim spreading of their, when the Muslim world woke up around 634, basically almost every place where the Muslims left a footprint was a place that the Christians had already pretty much pacified to annihilated the original pagan population. So these were a weakened, traumatized people from the Christians. So when the Muslims came, it was just like a walkover. They had some, the Christians had their knights. I mean, I shouldn't say, it was a walkover for people. So a big problem for the pagan world was they were not prepared. They lived in a place where, having the right information helped your life. Not being as informed often made life a little more difficult. But it was like live and let live. Everybody has to have their own gnosis. There was a tolerance. And one of the things, one of the marked differences between the ancient world and the Abrahamic is intolerance. Especially it seems to me at, the more common levels and at the official levels, it's pretty bloodthirsty. There's some kind of, blending in the middle where people seem reasonable, and I think that's actually part of the illusion. It's, it helps. It's good PR. So anyway, one of the things that, as we're trying to reclaim our heritage on this planet, draw on some ancestral memories. And then we realized that one of the problems we had with being tolerant was we weren't prepared for intolerance. So a couple of thousand years later, you could say some lessons have been learned. So in many ways, you could say from the Sophianic perspective, there's going to be a little irony here. Not everybody might see it. But, in many ways, from a perspective, as far as this resurgence, once again, of knowing who we are, where we are, knowing about our mother, when the efforts to squash it this time, I think the best reply is never again. So that kind of brings in the Kalika War Party, and the need for an immune system, because if a body has no way to mount an offensive against an infection, well, it's just a matter of time before the body succumbs completely to that infection. And so something has to be done, because never again. And that's where, so we kind of have a practical problem. We have people doing all kinds of kinetic fuckery in the world, and they're protected by legions of us who have sold our souls to them for a paycheck. That's an ugly situation. So, there's a couple of dissuading factors from getting to them in a kinetic way. I mean, there's billions of us, and a couple of hand and toefuls of them. I mean, it really is a no-brainer, except for they have hired swaths of us to protect them. And so once again, you have to wonder just how infected the species are, that the main predators of the species are able to hire protectors from the very species that they're preying on. I mean, this is, it is daunting to look at the psychology of humanity. I mean, to see such vigorous enabling of the abuse and enslavement of ourselves by ourselves is sobering, to say the least. And yes, they were able, and they were able to incentivize the hiring by owning the planet. But again, we lost our magical way. A lot of us probably would have said, you know what? How about we all just slit our throats, and you can have the planet to yourselves? We know that's what you want, right? No, it's not what they want at all. In other words, it's gonna take some effort to reclaim the Earth, but it's pretty clear that the kinetic option is not really there. So, to me, that kind of creates a situation of perhaps there's a magical response. So, get practical and be magical. Also, being magical just allows you to understand the supernatural world that you are that we are natural inhabitants of. We are supernatural beings in a supernatural world. Much of the expansion of our senses happens in the more magical settings. One of the things I think is probably already being experienced by many of us, and is the most common form of information exchange or information reception, and more often than not, is through clairaudience, or the ability to hear things being said to you. So I'm going to put some words into the veil. This veil between what we call natural and supernatural. Like, in other words, the veil that might allow an archon to be standing behind me or right here on my shoulder, and none of us sees it, but it could be right there. All right. Now, the reason we wouldn't perceive it is because of the limited spectrum that we have with regards to our perception. What we can hear, where our hearing stops both at the upper levels and the lower frequency levels, where our sight cuts off with regards to light spectrum, and including the amount of light, in other words, how much we can see in the dark or not. The tactility of our neurons of our skin. And so this is where I think I'm going to finally make, if there is any logic here, make some sense of something that a lot of people speak about but don't actually use it practically, and that's the quantum observer effect. Now, one of the things that really presenced it for me was observing electricity, and perhaps I'll circle back, but I don't want to go off on electricity. At least not where I am in the conversation. So, basically, because the things that exist in the supernatural world are beyond our physical senses, it seems that part of the quantum observer effect is that for you to be able to consider it 3D, real in our terms, you have to be able to observe it, touch it, somehow, even if it's as ephemeral as a breeze, you could feel it going across your skin. So basically, if an archon is on my shoulder, but it exists within outside my spectrum of where I can actually use my receiver brain to tell me it's in the environment. And then, so once I know it's in the environment, if my senses can perceive it, then the quantum, the stuff that kind of pulls its act together when you observe it, if you can't observe it, it's not there. If you could observe it, suddenly the quanta, or whatever suddenly jumps in, will suddenly be there. I mean, it's really pretty interesting. And actually, it was the first time I was actually able to logically, in words, left brain, negotiate this veil. But the beauty of clairaudience is that it is an extrasensory perception, and it works. It's already one that is very well used by our inner voice and the archons, and the fact that more and more people are understanding the brain as a receiver, so that there are waves that our brain is tuned to, like a radio frequency, and we can turn dials. So within that same frequency that we think we get our own thoughts, will also come intel from across the veil. And so when it comes to this kind of getting intel from disembodied sources, the veil has now become almost like a curtain. where you can't see what's on the other side of the curtain. And in many ways, it's almost more like a one-way mirror. You can't see on the other side of the mirror, but good chance they see through it. But like a curtain, our voices can pass back and forth. And so I really feel one of the quickest ways to get guidance, and you get much better guidance once you plug into the earth. I mean, again, what your source is greatly affects the magical world you experience. So like I say, come home to mama and then explore with her gnosis and watch how quickly things change, how unmysterious things become, how where once the world was confusing, the main thing that confuses you is how people can be so fucking ignorant. That's the biggest confusion. How do people behave like this? How are they really that tuned out? I mean, I see it. I know it. It has to be genuine. But how? How can you stand in the rain and not know you're getting wet? I don't know. I don't know how that's getting worked. But so like, a lot of people, there's a confusion about the world. The biggest confusion to me is what is wrong with us. So I'm going to take a breath, have a little bit of a cigarette. I felt that was fairly good. I guess I'll finish up. Learning about electricity. Learning how electricity moves on a board, how it can move in different directions, DC, AC. And all through this circular wire. Copper wire. In most cases, copper. The amount of information through uses of resistors, capacitors, and also sending in signal from your guitar to what is a current or a flow of electrons. To be able to pull a flow of electrons out of a wall, convert them into a DC current, feed your AC guitar current in between this traveling, and then it's basically you're talking to the electricity and then it remembers. I mean, the way a guitar signal is introduced into a tube, at least, is that basically what it is, you're energizing the tube, and one side has the negative electrons, and you have a plate that's more positively charged, so the negative electrons are attracted to the plate. Okay, so we have like two things. Here's where the electrons are coming from, and here's the plate that they're going to go to. And there's a space between them. There's actually like a floating area between the two parts of the tube. But there's a third part of this tube, and it goes between these two parts. It's called the screen. And what this screen, now once again, between these two parts, all we have is electricity flowing. Okay, and they're generated by pulses from the signal. So the greater the signal, the more excited electrons come, so they rise up, and here's this positive plate, and as they're all congregating, they jump across this plate. But the other thing they're doing with the guitar signals, they're actually putting a screen in the middle of the electrons. In other words, they're coming from point A going to point B. Well, in between point A and point B, the signal from whatever instrument, in my case it would be a guitar, is introduced in between there. In other words, the notes of the guitar, or including the pressure, everything that you did to that guitar string, including the note, the mistake you made if you made one, how well or poorly you hit it, whether you muted it a little bit because you didn't, anything that happened on that string got picked up by a magnet, turned into a signal. That signal gets inserted in between this flow of electrons, and the information in that signal, the electrons go, oh, we got it. And then they take that signal and continue the travel. Now the whole thing to do is from where that signal is going to travel, all these different things. And along that line, you have different components that can do different things. Resist, I won't get into breaking it down. But ultimately, you now have this signal and it has like some rough noise from here, and it's got maybe more low end or high end. So you insert these different resistors that basically tell, based on how you built them, they tell the electricity, well, you know something, let everything go through except for everything from this point up or this point down. And then it travels down the line and you can tell it to do other things. The amazing thing is how many times the original current, especially once it gets the signal and it's just traveling through all these electronic components, each time it's being told to do different things. Sometimes it's carrying a lot of current, very little amps, and you can turn it into less current with a few more amps. And then if it's too many amps, you can put something and it'll just eat the amps out so that you have less current and less amps. Okay, why it seems like I'm almost like getting excited here is because none of this would make sense unless the electrons were intelligent and could remember all this. I mean, when I look at what's being done to a signal as things get added to it and how it's subtracted, none of it would work unless the electrons cooperated. So in many ways, as people have said, we know how to use electricity, but we really don't understand it. I think Tesla did. And so you just get into this understanding of, especially like the electron and just how, and here's the joke, and this is where it comes into the observer effect. All of these things are happening along wires. So here's this thin band and there's electrons running, and basically, so I'll plug in a guitar and there's all these circuits going and then I'll hear it on the other end. And in many ways, it seems that like what's going on in the wire before it has to actually kind of show up in the real world as being done something, in many ways they just go back, the electrons go back to partying. In other words, they're just doing what electrons do, living in that time where there are lifetimes in a trillionth of a second for them. So, but when they show up at a specific station, like let's say at the speaker, all of that dancing comes out organized. It's really like the observer effect. It's almost like there's just electrons in there, but when it's supposed to be observed, they do everything that they were supposed to do, and this is all through an electrical current and magnets recording kinetic performances. It's mind-blowing. Okay, now I guess I'll take that. Now how that's I wanted to finish up with that concept that the quantum observer. In other words, like observing builds, not observing collapses. It's almost it's like it's there when it's supposed to be there, and when you're not looking, it's not there for you. It's just interesting. You don't have to get too. We don't have to get too pedantic or obsessive about it, but I was able to find some I felt some real world words, language, to make what's mysterious actually part of a quantum observer effect. And it's like, well, what prevents us? The fact that it's collapsed for us because we can't observe it. Hello, Metal Lady Benz. Ooh. It's got a pleasant email. A comment on the video I posted not too long ago. So how's everybody doing out there? Everybody feeling like? I made an assertion tonight. Basically, I'm saying that it is practical to be magical, especially now. Any thoughts on that as an assertion? As we wait for the results to come in, what else could I kind of go on? New Renaissance. That's something I wrote to myself. And I would like to cultivate, especially now we're getting into the music again. I would love to try and capture some of the ferment, excitement, sense of newness that attended the Renaissance that we, know from centuries back. And a big part of the Renaissance was interest in Western esoteric traditions. But there was also great flowering of art. And I've always enjoyed Renaissance. As a matter of fact, even, much of the clothes I like to wear is from Maresca, and what I'm wearing tonight is from Maresca. It's had a little extra work done on it. The blue velvet lining is extra. The button here is extra. The hood came with it. The hood's not there, but the lining on the hood was put there extra. But anyway, I just, and the reason I dress like this, because it's, when you look in the mirror, you go, hey, how does that look? Well, that looks right for me. But music, skills, weaving, making things by hand again, knowing how to make things from scratch, having the kind of skills where one minute you could be living in a modern world where those skills are almost seemed not practical, but in the blink of an EMP, suddenly they become practical. In the blink of an EMP. And real world skills will always have real world applications, and there, let's say, opportunity for barter, whatever barter looks like. It doesn't even have to be barter. Oh boy, my hair got all messed up from putting the hood on. Yeah, so there's a piece of property here that I actually moved to hope one day come into possession of, and I've always wanted to have a kind of year-round Renaissance feel to it as a community. Because in this area are a lot of the back to the land people who came to Floyd, Virginia, like 30 years ago, and a lot of them actually are what you would call the Renaissance community. Now they go to Texas and Massachusetts. There's Ren fairs all over the place, all over the world, but also all over the United States. And so that's how they make their living. And then on the off season, I'm quite sure they're making inventory and also just taking a little time off. And I just thought how cool it would be is if, if there was like a village where these, where these people lived, and where the flavor of a traditional society could be felt. The interesting thing is, even though this piece of land is like right in the middle of Floyd, the town of Floyd has like 700 people. When you're on this property, it's like the only world you're aware of is the Blue Ridge mountain view you get while you're on one of the hills that overlook it. Other than that, it feels like you have left the world and gone into another dimension. And it has its own water, has horses that come with it. This is a land where you don't need a water authority to have water to drink. And the whole town, this is this specific property, But the case of how we're situated geographically or geologically in the land itself, all of the water that originates in Floyd, and we have a lot of springs and stuff, all the water that originates in Floyd flows out. None of the water that we consume in Floyd has flowed in from the outside. So the other thing about making kind of like a Renaissance-based village community is because now you're inviting people with skills. The reason most intentional communities fall apart is you have the unskilled, and then you have the skilled. But usually the ones who are skilled were skilled at becoming lawyers, and then joining intentional communities, becoming little dictators. And again, I don't mean to make them sound bad. They pursue what they did. They got they might not be the nicest people, but at least they do have some kind of work ethic. And then they mix it up with a bunch of people who are looking for socialism. And that means that they get stuff for free, but they don't know where it comes from. But I'm entitled to stuff for free. Isn't that what socialism's all about? They don't understand where shit comes from. So, the idea of trying, really building a community of people of skills and abilities so that you don't have that normal, the ones who manage to keep the community running and the other ones you almost got to find chores to do so that they earn, that's how most intentional communities end up as. Where instead of, building it up from the thing, and a lot of people, they go to the banks for mortgages. They do all kinds of things that just keep that system alive as you're trying to, you're running to it. And meanwhile, you're making monthly, you got people on your magical place making monthly payments to the thing that is ruining our world in many ways. And the other thing is it's a community where everybody knows each other. You may not hang out. I mean, I lived at Omega for 7 years, and everybody knew me. It was kind of hard not to recognize me, but and some people were close and some people weren't. And there were people I never had a conversation to, but sometimes again they knew me and they'd come over and they'd go, by the way, and they'd introduce themselves. They knew who I was, because when they introduced themselves, they had something that looked like I might be able to help them with, let's say that. And as they're looking across the campus and they're going, I got this one particular issue. I bet you he's the one I should talk to. So there is a real need for communities of community, not neighborhoods. And but that's what happens when these communities are based on who can afford to be in the community, as opposed to like having I'm not going to talk about the whole thing. I guess talking too much often is what diffuses things. One reason I haven't talked much about it. So I'm really talking more about the ideas associated than the thing itself. And Kim, and this, comes in with one of the, if being magical is practical, then it would also be real practical to get in touch, in complete communion with the source of our force, power, energy, being, and that would be the earth, Sophia, our mother. We can be magicians without her. It's very clear that you can be a magician of all kinds of skill or fuckery, because we are magical beings, and there's a whole kind of collapsed field waiting for you to enter it and put stuff in there. But if you're properly connected to your source, that I cannot emphasize it, and John has emphasized a few times. You leave that world. You have a foot in it, you can see it, but suddenly the earth and the world, one's in color and one is this horrible gray. And it becomes starkly, like uncomfortably clear. But again, this biggest, it's not the size of and how much is there, it's how it could all end tomorrow with the shift in our consciousness as the species that covers this planet. I mean, we cover the planet. And can you imagine that species being hooked into a common dream intelligence, the intelligence of our source? And then being able to take that perception, looking at the gray, and notice that basically it's already starting to go away because it was only held up by us holding it there. Once again, the physical security of people who do a lot of rotten stuff is provided by us to them. Their existence is predicated on our cooperation. We have to get how we cooperate, aid, abet, and support them as a collective. It's not good enough to say, well, I'm not doing that. Doesn't matter that I'm not or you're not. We are. And if we don't want it to be us versus them, then when we look at what we're doing and we see most people checked out, it becomes a little bit of a concern. And so much of what is wrong with this world would be people remembering who their mother, their creator, and our creation story is. And it doesn't have to be that exact one, but it comes from the earth and the mother. Again, you can have, there are many iterations of that basic cosmic, I don't like the word fact, but that cosmic situation. And it's really hard for us to wield the magic and the rightful sovereign power we have when billions of people don't know they're sovereigns of this planet. They don't know what a sovereign is, and they don't know who the sovereign that made us sovereigns is. That's a lot of not knowing, and that much not knowing usually leads to impotence. Impotence as a species. So that's one of the reasons why, as shocking sometimes as some of the things that you hear from the Kalika War Party, which to me is the T-Cell Committee, if you realize just how bad things have gotten on this planet and how criminal the original action is, and that now that we know, and part of the reason it happened the first time is because we were so accepting, we were so tolerant, including being tolerant of intolerance. So all I would like to say, all this Nasa would like to say is, never again. Never again. So I've used two ironic phrases tonight. I'll say what they are, I won't explain them. The first one was Lebensraum, and the second one is never again. Oh, Mari, you brought up something that was actually part of something I got a little bit cracked for myself. I have to clear my lungs here. Where's that mute? And it also really starts putting some perspective on gray alien and Archon. Now, one of the things that really should not escape any of our attention are the depictions of either gray aliens, the picture of the being that I guess Aleister Crowley or the Vril Society got in touch with, and the description in the Nag Hammadi text of the Archons as a he-who, or something that looks like an aborted baby that was just about full term. So this he-who aborted fetus picture and the gray with little spindly body, big head, is too close for it to be a coincidence. It's slightly different language of the same phenomenon. So, now I had two, we'll call them attempted abduction experiences, and I can keep them pretty short because I'm certainly not going for the drama. The first one, was that typical thing where it seemed like where I slept, I had a window that was at the foot of the bed, and it was open. So I wake up and it seems like I'm more mentally, but it seems like my attention's drawn to the window, and I can kind of like see what maybe looks like the top of heads moving out there. But in other words, it's very clear to my perception that there is more than one something outside my window, and with the intention of coming in, or at least with the intention of interacting with me. So I go to move towards the window, and I can't move. I can hear the TV on with my roommates in the next room, and so I go to yell to get them in there, and my vocal cords don't work. It seems like I'm able to wriggle and struggle a little bit, and in that struggling, they left. So it seems like was I fighting? There was a little fear, adrenaline picking in, but again, it was just like, look, I come from the Bronx. I've been in fights. You just got to hold your shit together, or things will get very bad. And so I'm just gonna turn away from the chat. And all right, so that was that one. Made it through. Not too long afterwards, in the same bedroom, and it was almost like take two. And in so many ways. I was in the same bed, same position, people in another room watching TV. Same kind of activity outside the window. And I go to do something about it, and I realized, okay, I can't move, I can't shout. All of a sudden, out of sight of my mind, I go, hey, Jesus. And all of a sudden, they're gone, and I can move. So, I didn't let that moment end just there. I realized I had said Jesus, and the scene completely shifts. But it's quiet. And so I kind of say, it's just like, wow, you really helped. And it was just like, yeah. And it was like, is there something I should know or something? Like, yeah, call on me and I'll be there. And then over the years, that relationship with this being that responded to the name Jesus, this being knows some of the common titles that might get used and have traditionally been used. There's not only a couple of thousand years, or at least 1,000 years of this being used, there's a couple of millions of applications during those years. So it's a it's a well nourished spirit with different facets according to how you interact with it. So anyway, that's kind of an aside. That's for all the, that's for all the people who love Jesus. I mean, I acknowledge this. The Christos. The Christos is an amazing spirit, but boy, talk about laid back. I mean, powerful, but at the same time with no agenda. Except, it's really an energy to spend quiet time with. What I found out when I try to engage it in like a little more of a dialogue, then other more human aspects seem to come in, and then the energy shifts a little bit. And then, so it just seems to me that this isn't really meant to be a being for me to dialogue with, as to call on when I could use a little support. And I'll never forget the night I was getting ready to go do some magical work, and I was going to undertake some things that could put me on radar, and which meant, and once you get picked up on a radar, the fighters come out to meet you. So being as I had a little idea that some hornets might come out, and so I said, hey, it's like kind of like, hey, Christos, you want to join me on this journey? And I got the answer. It was just like, you know what? You know how to do this on your own. And if you're going to do this, you're going to do this on your own. And that was just really cool. That was like a real teaching moment. What a really, really great spirit. But fortunately for me, it doesn't come with baggage. Like, so when I engage it in conversation, some of the baggage started showing up. But as a spirit, it doesn't have an agenda. It's like, what do you need? So now we come to, so I had those experiences and thinking that I had sleep paralysis. Well, something happened to me about a year or so ago, and it only recently came to my memory fresh, and I was actually able to take that experience, those experiences, and then actually kind of come up with at least a working conceptual answer for the Archon Gray interplay. Now, there are two different places. I'm going to go to the easier place, and then if I'm still there, or if I remember, there's if things can get a little richer. But I'm gonna do the low fat version first, and maybe only. So I remember this morning, that morning, that I was sitting on the edge. My bed's behind me, and I remember finding myself suddenly sitting up in my bed, and everything. And as far as I knew, I was awake. And once again, my experience was sitting up, awake in my bed. And the reason I'm sitting up is because it feels like the earth is moving, like almost like an earthquake. So I'm sitting up, and it's like there's a sense of movement, like goo, 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 goo. But I'm looking, as I look around my room, and as I'm looking at my room, it's the same room that I would expect to be seeing awake. So that's why at that time there was, matter of fact, it's just amazing how that awake sleep thing completely blurred until I could put two different situations up against each other. So I'm looking around the room, nothing's moving, and I still have this sense of earthquake. Suddenly, the end of my bed lifts up as if like somebody had taken two hooks, put them on either side of the end of the bed, and was lifting them simultaneously. So I'm have the experience of being on the bed that's going whoop 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 whoop. That's and I actually felt my body. I mean, it was like a horse. Whoop, whoop. I mean, that's what it was doing. It's going up and going down and going up and going down. And then finally that settled in, and I guess at some point I must have fallen back to sleep. And then I remember when I woke up, I went, "Oh my God, that was really bizarre." Now I'm realizing that that was me in my astral body, sitting up in my bed, and that astral body is so close to the physical world that I perceive the same room. And even though I'm moving, and again, because I'm moving, that's there's kinetic energy. It's very difficult for the amount of kinetic energy I was experiencing for it not, again, you have a floor, vibrations, something. And no, the rest of the room maintained like that. Okay, so here's the point I'm trying to get to. At least I think I'm at that point in the story. People who have been abducted by aliens have often reported going through walls. Something you can do in your astral body. I mean, obviously, I was having an astral body experience on my astral bed in an astral room. That was identical. I mean, again, perceptually, as far as I knew, I was awake. I mean, this is even beyond lucid dreaming. So, what I am starting to get around this sleep paralysis is that a part of this abduction thing is to get you to wake up in your astral body. Okay? Your physical body is asleep. So all of the safeguards from you smashing yourself in the head while you're having a particularly energetic dream, those kind of muscle, that take away all the tonality, basically a form of paralysis, is in place. When you're properly sleeping, dreaming, that is a safeguard. It makes sense. It even saves energy. So for me, what I'm starting to kind of get from this abduction experiences and how it can be the archons and not like, nuts and bolts aliens, especially based on the physical description. So you wake up in your astral body, and because you're physically asleep, your body is paralyzed, but you're as awake in your astral body as you would be as if you're awake in your physical body. If you do not manage to break whatever spell that's going on there, apparently they can at that point lift you out of your astral body and then bring you to wherever, a saucer, Now again, in my astral body, when that bed was shaking, it was like holding on to a bucking horse. But it happened in a non-physical world. So now you start seeing, like going into a place where you see real people and maybe feel real things going up your butt and all the rest of stuff. And then even the fact of how closely knitted your astral body is to your physical body, that once your astral body drops back in, it might have some impact on the memory of the tissue. Like suddenly this body drops in and tissue goes, oh, we're rearranged all wrong. We have this new pattern here we have to somehow duplicate. And so it seems to be getting clearer to me that much of the alien phenomenon is archon phenomenon, which would be a really good reason why the government doesn't want to go there, is because the government is really, is a demiurgic, archontic, creation. So by not addressing the issue, they can make it still seem like this is science fiction, nuts and bolts tech. and they are much more comfortable with covering up a nuts and bolts tech thing than having an exposure of, first of all, the dual world humans live in, what kind of the physics of those worlds are, and also, you know, again, those, they got to keep them protected because that's their bosses. So anyway, that's kind of like a roundabout way, but it's really starting to seem to me that much, not all, much of the alien stuff, especially much of the stuff we're covering, much of the ufology aspect of it, is, to me, is starting to show up as more and more of an archontic phenomenon played out on the astral plane, which is so close to the physical plane that the memories of people on the astral plane are just like the one I had on the edge of my bed, where I needed like some other comparison to even tell me that that didn't really happen to me in my biological body. So I'm going to kind of like just have a pause there. I haven't looked at the chat since I said I wasn't going to look at it, so now I'll return to the chat. All right, so what do we got here? Mm-hmm. I did myself a service staying out of the chat. And that was for the people who will be watching this later. Right? Starting to get the hang of addressing two crowds at once. Hello, Aaron. I didn't greet you. So I guess we're probably coming towards the end of this broadcast, this live stream. I just felt like some, you know, like it, also as I'm kind of like turning on the musician again, it's like, hey, it's Saturday night. All right, well, I have a stage. Let me turn on the camera. And then once you get the stage, just go, okay, now that you got the stage, make sure you don't waste people's time. So, the people in the chat didn't have much to say, but so anybody out there listening to the, you know, the video later, if you have any comments about that kind of astral world, nuts and bolts world, I don't know if some of you out there were aware or not that even in you know the Nag Hammadi text, that there were mentions of these off-planet entities that are not corporeal, but in the let's say in the astral world, they have a certain look, and that description from 2,000 years is a very would get somebody on a criminal lineup in a modern forensics case. And so you know, I just again, for the people who will listen to this video later, if you have any comments about what you think about that. That maybe there's a lot less nuts and bolts. Again, I'm not saying this is not an either or, but it seems like much of the phenomenon is with these gray types. And of course, there was one other type mentioned in Nag Hammadi who seemed to be the gray bosses, and that were these dragon-looking beings or Draco-looking beings. So you'll have like what David Icke is saying, which is kind of real world nuts and bolts, and then you have what the Gnostics were saying, or at least the Coptic Gnostics, and about the He Who and the Dracones, And it's like, my God, we basically have a match, except one is in the astral, and one person is positing it as physical. And of course, could there be a little bit of both? Yeah, there could be a little bit of both. But again, we're talking, where do they live? Yeah, I mean, if you're having regular sleep paralysis events with some like that comes with the experience of somebody trying to do something with you during that compromising, that to me is the archons. But again, we normally would call that alien behavior. But the archons are aliens. So there's still some stuff. We don't have to have the answers right now. But I think would help us all to start parsing this out, being more open. And I don't have, my biggest gripe with ufology is how boring it is. So anything that would bring those sweet people something that maybe sharing their experiences might be of interest to people besides ufologists, that would be really cool. Now, Lee, when you said you have your opinions about Ike personally, I'm assuming you're talking about his material and not the man himself, because I know it'd be pretty hard for us to comment about people we don't know a whole lot about. So it'd have to be about their material. Yeah, you know something, Ike has done his part, just like Alex Jones does his part. They're reaching a lot of people. If you stay there, you're stuck. But they're doing good work. I mean, I never mind watch Alex Jones. I can barely read the titles he puts on his videos. It's clickbaity. It's polarizing. It's us versus them shit. I'm quite sure it's great for the market, and that's one of the issues I have. Here's a guy who's running an independent business. That would be Alex Jones. He has no corporate sponsors. He has his own business. So, being a little wackadoo and controversial and what's going on over at Info, it kind of helps him pay his bills. And again, it's that, even though in his case it's not corporate, I still probably, I think we'd see a more responsible and possibly slightly more sedate Alex Jones, if the need for lots of money to do what he's doing and getting there. But again, there are certain people, if somebody's not shouting at them, they can't hear a word that's being said. Yeah, I mean, not only is, like you say, he's too loud. I mean, right now, just to go, and there's another one, Next News Network, with this guy Gary Franchi, who can't. I've never seen him read a single piece. He reads off a teleprompter. I don't think he's ever read one piece that he hasn't mangled one word. He is one of the worst readers I have ever encountered. And he's, and then the titles there. I mean, they're so right-wing that all you can do is fly in circles. It's ridiculous. I mean, and I do, the goobs are part of the globalists, and I consider the globalists to be a big part of the problem. So obviously, anybody who's aware of the globalists and points the finger at them, I'm always happy about that part. But you know what? I know they're there, and I can't really go with the clown show that's starting to come with people who are taking that part of a responsible stance of knowing about the globalists, but the rest is embarrassing. So anyway, this I guess Saturday. I'm kind of glad to see that. In many ways, we never really got up too high. I think that might mean that people are out on a Saturday night. I like that a lot. Really, it'd be nice if we could go out on weekends and not worry about flashing lights behind us. All for our protection, of course. So, yeah, I guess that's it. I got my little drawing pad. I'm hoping to start doing some sketches. I'm actually trying to get some of my ideas in more of a, a picture. So instead of 1,000 words of text, perhaps I can sketch out some of the stuff. So thank you all. Thank you, live chat especially, because I can thank you right now. And for those of you who will watch this video after it's posted, thank you for subscribing, for watching, commenting if you do. I noticed it's funny, a couple times I saw my hand go up and it looked like it was colored, and I'm looking down and going, oh no. So anyway, good people, take care of yourselves. Thanks for a very civil and community chat. And of course, on Monday night, Can't You Hear Me Gnostic, 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I'll see you all then. I'm going to stop streaming, and it will be anywhere from 8